Part 11 Devastation Timeline. Time traveler hunts aliens. The rooftop was the same. Again, wind pushed dust and debris across the weathered concrete, a familiar, gritty whisper. Above me, the skyline still flickered, a glitching digital ghost, but it was weaker this time. A containment failure on both sides had forced their systems to recalibrate. My engine display pulsed against my back. 3 jumps remaining, 27 hours. That was all I had. The war had entered a new phase. Both enemies, the Catalyst and the Archivists, were now visible to each other. And to me, I couldn't afford to wait for their next move. I had to find the source. I opened the engine's interface, my fingers flying across the holographic display. I was looking for unstable sectors. If the Catalyst was deliberately destabilizing timelines to force a convergence, the fractures, the seams of reality, would have to appear somewhere first. A moment later, the engine highlighted a cluster of anomalies. South Atlantic, the year marker was unstable, flickering between dates, a temporal bleed. That was it. I selected the coordinate. If a fracture was growing there, I could measure the scale of the collapse, understand the weapon they were using against us. I initiated the jump. 2 jumps remaining. I landed in absolute silence. The sky was a uniform, oppressive gray. Ash drifted down like gentle snow, coating everything in a layer of mourning. The city that should have been here was gone. Only the skeletal remains of skyscrapers clawed at the sky, their steel bones blackened and twisted. Burn marks scarred the streets like ancient runes. Rusted-out vehicles sat exactly where they had stopped decades earlier, silent monuments to a world that had simply ceased to be. I found a damaged street terminal, its screen cracked but still faintly glowing. I tapped the surface, and the date flickered into view, 2061. It was too early, far too early. Human civilization should have been thriving, or at least still fighting. This wasn't the aftermath of a war I recognized. Something was fundamentally wrong with the horizon. The ocean seemed closer, much closer. I walked toward the coastline and saw that half of it had simply collapsed into the sea. This wasn't the result of bombs or orbital strikes. This was instability. Reality itself had failed to hold its shape, and the geography had crumbled. Then I saw movement in the distance. Survivors. A small, ragged group moving between the shattered buildings. They carried improvised weapons pipes, sharpened rebar, an old hunting rifle. They weren't fighting aliens. They were hunting for food, or for each other. One of them spotted me. He raised his rifle, his voice raspy and sharp. "Stay where you are." I stopped, holding my hands up slowly. They approached, their eyes wary, sunken with exhaustion and suspicion. The leader, a man with a graying beard and a haunted look, gestured toward the sky. "You with the towers?" he asked. I looked at him, confused. "What towers?" He pointed a trembling finger upward. I turned my head and followed his gaze. There, hanging silently in high orbit, floating above the perpetual gray clouds, were enormous alien structures. They weren't ships, not for transport or war. They were platforms, vast, geometric, and humming with a power I could feel even from the ground. Archivist stabilization arrays. The man's voice pulled me back. "They showed up 20 years ago," he said, his voice flat, "right after the sky started breaking. And then I understood. This timeline had reached its convergence threshold. The fabric of its reality had become so frayed that the Archivists had stepped in. Not to save humanity, to replace it. Quietly, systematically, the cities were abandoned. The population was managed, reduced. Civilization was reset under their silent, watchful supervision. It was exactly what the captured Archivist had told me. This wasn't correction. It was replacement, a culling. The man's gaze dropped to the engine on my back, its faint lights reflecting in his tired eyes. "You one of them?" he asked, his grip tightening on his rifle. "No," I said. His shoulders sagged with a flicker of relief, but the suspicion didn't leave his face. "Then leave," he said. It wasn't a threat, just a statement. A plea. I gave a single, slow nod and walked away. This world was the proof I needed. If the timeline buffering returned under Archivist control, this was humanity's future. We would become a protected species on a cosmic preserve, managed, reduced, contained, forever. I reached the new, broken shoreline. As I stood there, the ocean glitched for a split second, the water vanished, exposing the raw, muddy seafloor for miles. Then, just as suddenly, it snapped back with a soundless concussion. The buffering collapse was still spreading, a cancer eating this reality from the inside out. This timeline was dying a slow, managed death. I checked my engine again. Still just 2 jumps remaining. I couldn't recharge here, not on this ruined Earth. But then, something new appeared on the interface. A signal. faint, but clear. Alien. One of the stabilization arrays in orbit was venting excess temporal energy. A maintenance surge. It was the same type of energy I had once used to recharge the engine in the ruins of a Siberian lab. An eternity ago, I looked up at the massive, continent-sized structure hanging above the clouds. If I could get up there, I could recharge. But the moment I arrived, the archivists would know. They would see me. I considered the numbers, the terrifying calculus of my situation. 2 jumps left. If I jumped directly into orbit and failed to connect to the power source in time, the engine would die, the war would end, and I would be adrift in a dying timeline. But if I succeeded, I would regain full mobility. I would have a fighting chance. The entire balance of the war would shift again. I didn't hesitate. I entered the coordinates, a direct insertion, upper atmosphere, right next to the maintenance conduit. I took one last look at the ruined world around me, the silent testament to what would happen if the archivists won. Then, I triggered the jump. The sky tore open in a flash of blue light. 1 jump remaining. I vanished from the dying Earth and appeared inside the alien stabilization array. The air hummed with an unimaginable concentration of power. Temporal energy, raw and untamed, flowed through conduits the size of subway tunnels. It was more power than I had ever seen in one place, a captured, harnessed star. The engine on my back reacted instantly, its hunger insatiable. The charging sequence began without my command. Energy surged through the housing, a violent, vibrating torrent. The jump counter on my display flickered wildly. 1 jump, 3 jumps, 6, 9. The vibration stabilized. 12 jumps available. Recharge complete. But as the last digit settled, alarms began to scream throughout the alien structure. The archivists knew I was here. Lights across the vast chamber shifted from a calm white to a piercing, aggressive red. Defense units began to activate in the distance. I sealed the engine's casing and turned toward the exit corridor. It was all clear now. The catalyst brings collapse. The archivists bring replacement to different apocalypses, to futures that did not belong to humanity. And now, for the first time since this war began, I had enough power to fight both. The hunt was back on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you next time.